Planetary defense cannons thundered, hurling shells the size of starships toward the invading Benzite armada. Even as the massive projectiles tore through the enemy fleet, more Benzite dreadnoughts materialized from warp portals, their weapons charged and ready to fire. Captain Gary Collins gripped the armrests of his command chair, his knuckles white, as he watched the GAS Resolute's shields flicker under a barrage of plasma torpedoes. The Resolute, once the pride of the Galactic Alliance fleet, now drifted listlessly, her hull breached in a dozen places, venting atmosphere and crew into the uncaring void. "Captain!" Sirefather's voice crackled over the comm, strained with desperation. "We can't hold them off much longer. We need reinforcements." Gary's jaw clenched. He knew there were no reinforcements to send. The rest of the Alliance fleet lay in ruins, smashed to scrap by the relentless Benzite onslaught. He closed his eyes, steeling himself for the order he never wanted to give. "Sirefather, you have to evacuate. Get your people to the escape pods. We can't help you." The words tasted like ashes in his mouth. The Resolute limped back to Frontier Epsilon 6, trailing debris and frozen corpses. Gary stood before Admiral Helena Vance and the other Alliance leaders, his head bowed in defeat as he delivered the grim news. "The Benzites are unstoppable," he said. "At this rate, they'll conquer every Alliance world within a year. Our people are losing hope. Some are even talking about surrender." Admiral Vance leaned forward, her eyes glinting with a fierce determination. "Not yet, Captain. We have one last card to play." She tapped a series of commands into the holotable, bringing up schematics of a warship unlike any Gary had ever seen. "Behold the Dreadnought Initiative. For years, our best scientists and engineers have been working on a new class of warship, one that could turn the tide against the Benzites. Heavily armored, bristling with advanced weaponry, these ships are our last hope." Gary studied the schematics, a flicker of hope kindling in his chest. "When will they be ready?" "The flagship, the Gas Titan, is nearing completion in a hidden shipyard. I want you to assemble a crew and take command." Gary nodded, the weight of the war settling heavily on his shoulders. As he prepared to leave, an aide burst into the room, his face pale. "Admiral, the Benzites have taken Sigma Centauri. They've enslaved the entire population." Gary's heart sank. The war seemed all but lost. But as he gazed at the hologram of the Titan, he felt a spark of defiance. The Dreadnoughts were coming, and with them, perhaps, a chance for humanity to rise from the ashes of defeat and reclaim the stars. Gary stepped into the cavernous hangar of the hidden shipyard, his footsteps echoing off the metal deck. Before him, the GAS Titan loomed like a slumbering giant, her sleek hull filled with weapon emplacements and sensor arrays. Scaffolding and gantries surrounded the mighty vessel, crawling with engineers and technicians working feverishly to complete her. A wiry, white-haired man in grease-stained coveralls approached, his piercing blue eyes alight with manic energy. "Captain Collins, I presume. Dr. Ethan Roth, Chief Engineer of the Dreadnought Initiative." He thrust out a calloused hand. Gary shook it firmly. "Doctor, I've heard great things about your work here." Roth grinned. "Oh, you ain't seen nothing yet, Captain. Come on, let me give you the grand tour." As they walked along the Titan's flank, Roth pointed out the ship's features with undisguised pride. "She's got triple redundant shielding, enough to shrug off a point-blank nuke. And these beam emitters? They'll slice through Benzite armor without effort." Gary nodded, impressed. "What about propulsion?" "Ah, now that's the real game changer." Roth lowered his voice conspiratorially. "We've developed a new FTL drive, one that'll leave the Benzites eating our ion trail. Problem is, some of the key components are in short supply, thanks to those bastards hitting our supply lines." A familiar voice rang out across the hangar. "Perhaps I can help with that." Gary spun around to see Sirefather striding towards them, his feline eyes glinting with purpose. The Orion clasped Gary's arm in a warrior's greeting. "Sirefather, how?" "I escaped, my friend, but my homeworld, the Benzites, have conquered it, enslaved my people." Sirefather's claws flexed, as if itching to rend Benzite flesh. "I come to join your dreadnought crew, to avenge the fallen and free those in chains." Gary clasped the Orion's shoulder. Welcome aboard. In a conference room high above Earth, Admiral Vance faced the assembled Alliance leaders. "The Dreadnoughts are our last, best hope," she declared. "We must deploy them now while we still can." Senator Grayson, a hawkish human with cold eyes, leaned forward. "And what if they fail, Admiral? What if all you've done is given the Benzites bigger targets?" Sire-Father slammed a fist on the table, his voice a feral growl. "We cannot cower in fear. We must strike back, show the enemy that we will never submit." The debate raged, but in the end, Vance carried the day. The Dreadnoughts would fly. Back at the shipyard, Gary and Sire-Father worked with Roth to assemble the Titan's crew. They chose the best and bravest from the Alliance ranks. Grizzled veterans, alien warriors, and fresh-faced recruits determined to make a difference. Among them was Lieutenant Ava Novak, a human pilot with haunted eyes and a steely dedication. Gary had read her file, a tragic past, a family lost to the Benzites, and knew she would fight to her last breath. As the crew trained, news arrived of a shocking atrocity. The Benzites had unleashed a bioweapon on an Alliance world, slaughtering millions. In the Titan's corridors, the crew's purpose hardened into icy rage. The day finally came when the mighty ship was ready, her engines thrumming with barely restrained power. Gary stood on the bridge, Sire-Father and Novak at his side, as the Titan slipped her moorings and set course for the front lines. They all knew the odds they faced, the losses they had endured. But as the stars streaked past the view screen, Gary felt a flicker of hope amid the grim certainty of war. The Titan was more than a ship. She was an embodiment of the Alliance's spirit, a defiant cry against the darkness. And with her crew united in purpose, she would meet the Benzite fleet head-on, determined to forge a path to victory or die trying. The Titan's engines flared to life, propelling the massive warship out of the hidden shipyard. Flanking her were the Vengeance and Indomitable, their sleek hulls gleaming in the starlight. Gary stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back, as he watched the stars streak by. "Course laid in for the Zeta Crucis system, Captain," Lieutenant Novak reported from her station. "ETA 6 hours at current speed." Gary nodded, about to respond when a shrill alarm cut through the air. Sire-Father's ears twitched as he leaned over his console. "Distress signal detected," the Orion growled. "Alliance transport under attack by Benzite raiders." Gary's teeth clenched. They couldn't afford delays, but neither could they abandon their own. "Alter course. We're going in." The Titan dropped out of FTL, shields flaring as it absorbed a barrage of Benzite fire. Through the view screen, Gary saw the battered transport, its hull breached in multiple places. Benzite boarding craft clung to it like parasites. "Sire-Father, suppressing fire on those raiders. Novak, get us in close. I'm leading a boarding party." Minutes later, Gary crouched in the transport's corridor, pulse rifle at the ready. Beside him, Sergeant Razalok's massive form filled the narrow space, the Brakiri's 4 eyes scanning for threats. A scream echoed from around the corner, followed by the distinctive whine of Benzite energy weapons. Gary signaled, and his team moved. They rounded the bend to find a group of civilians pinned down by Benzite fire. Among them, a young Orion woman returned fire with a salvaged weapon, her aim precise despite the chaos. "Razalok covering fire," Gary ordered. The Brakiri's weapon roared, forcing the Benzites into cover. Gary and his team surged forward, cutting down the invaders with practiced efficiency. As the last Benzite fell, the Orion woman approached Gary. "I'm Lyra, ship's engineer. Thank you for the rescue, but you need to know, I have critical intelligence about a hidden Benzite supply base." Gary's eyes widened. "You're coming with us. This could change everything." Back on the Titan, tensions simmered beneath the surface as they rejoined the other Dreadnoughts. Gary could feel the weight of alien eyes upon him, sense the unspoken resentment. It came to a head when they detected the Benzite battle group moving to flank the Alliance fleet. Sire-Father's claws dug into the tactical display as he snarled, "We must attack now! Our firepower could devastate their forces." "Negative," Gary snapped. "We have our orders. We rendezvous with the fleet." Sirefather's fur bristled. Always hiding behind human authority. While you follow orders, our people die. The bridge fell silent, the air thick with tension. It was Lyra who stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. Both of you want the same thing, to save lives and defeat the Benzites. But divided, we fall. United, we might just have a chance. The wisdom in her words seemed to deflate both men. Gary nodded grudgingly, while Sirefather's posture relaxed. When they reached the rallying point, chaos greeted them. The Alliance fleet was embroiled in a massive firefight with the Benzite armada, energy weapons and missiles crisscrossing the void. Vengeance, Indomitable, support the fleet, Gary ordered. We're going after their supply base. The Titan peeled away, plunging into the heart of an asteroid field. On the bridge, Novak's hands danced over the controls, guiding the massive ship through the treacherous terrain. Multiple hostiles, locking on, Sirefather called out. Evasive maneuvers, Gary ordered. Return fire, all batteries. The Titans shuddered as Benzite weapons found their mark, but Sirefather's counterattack was devastating. Benzite ships and installations erupted into fireballs, their debris adding to the asteroid field's dangers. They broke through the defenses, the supply base looming before them. Gary allowed himself a grim smile. Fire everything we've got. The Titan unleashed hell. Beam weapons sliced through hardened bunkers, while missiles found their marks with unerring precision. Chain reactions rippled through the base, secondary explosions growing in intensity. As they limped away, the entire asteroid field erupted behind them, the supply base consumed in a cataclysmic fireball. Returning to the main battle, they found the tide had turned. The Alliance fleet, bolstered by the other Dreadnoughts, had pushed the Benzites into full retreat. Cheers erupted across the comms, but Gary's celebration was short-lived. A priority message from Alliance intelligence flashed on his screen, its contents chilling him to the bone. Encrypted Benzite transmission intercepted, he read aloud. They speak of a new weapon, capable of destroying entire planets. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Gary looked at his crew, human, Orion, Brakiri, and a dozen other species. Despite their differences, he saw the same drive in every eye. Whatever horrors lay ahead, they would face them together. Gary's blood ran cold as he processed the intelligence report. A planet-destroying weapon in Benzite hands could spell doom for the Alliance. He opened his mouth to speak when the bridge erupted in chaos. Multiple hostile signatures dropping out of FTL, Sirefather roared. It's a Benzite battle group. The view screen lit up with enemy vessels, their weapons already charging. Gary's tactical training kicked in. All hands, battle stations. Novak, evasive maneuvers. Sirefather, target their lead ships. The Titan banked hard, narrowly avoiding a barrage of plasma torpedoes. Her sister ships, Vengeance and Indomitable, moved to flank the Benzite formation. For a moment, it seemed the Dreadnoughts' superior firepower would carry the day. Then everything changed. A massive Benzite dreadnought emerged from the melee, its hull dripping with weapons unlike anything they'd encountered. Energy beams lanced out, slicing through Alliance ships with terrifying ease. New contact, Lyra shouted from her station. Energy readings off the scale. Gary's stomach dropped as he recognized the newcomer's insignia. It's Horth, he breathed. The infamous Benzite warlord had joined the fray. Alarms blared as Horth's flagship targeted the Titan. Shields at 60%, Sirefather growled. We can't take much more of this. Gary's mind raced. They needed a new strategy, fast. Novak, plot a course for that asteroid field. We'll use it for cover. As the Titan dove for safety, a priority transmission cut through the din. Gary's face paled as he listened. They've hit Proxima Colony, he announced, his voice hollow. My homeworld. For a heartbeat, silence gripped the bridge. Then Sirefather spoke, his eyes blazing. We cannot abandon your people, Captain. Gary nodded, squaring his shoulders. Agreed. Relay to Vengeance and Indomitable. We're changing course. We fight for Proxima. The journey to the besieged world felt agonizingly slow. When they dropped out of FTL, a hellish vista greeted them. Proxima's cities burned, Benzite ships raining destruction from orbit. "Sire Father, assemble a strike team," Gary ordered. "Get down there and evacuate as many civilians as you can. Novak, launch fighters to run interference." As Sire Father's team departed, the Dreadnoughts engaged Horth's fleet. The void lit up with weapons fire, hulls rupturing and shields flaring. On the planet's surface, Sire Father led his warriors through burning streets. They fought tooth and nail, guiding terrified colonists to waiting shuttles. Just as hope began to fade, Lyra's voice crackled over the comms. "Activating Benzite jamming device, now!" The effect was instantaneous. Enemy troops stumbled, their coordinated assault faltering. Sire Father seized the opportunity, pushing forward to extract the final group of survivors. In orbit, the battle raged on. The Titan shuddered under repeated impacts, her armor cracking. Gary gripped his chair as another salvo rocked the ship. "Hull breach on deck 7, an ensign called out. "Weapons offline." Gary's heart sank as he watched Horth's flagship close in for the kill. He knew what had to be done. "All hands, abandon ship. Get to the escape pods." As the crew scrambled to evacuate, Gary remained on the bridge, guiding the wounded Titan on her final voyage. With the last of her power, he aimed the massive ship directly at Horth's vessel. The blinding flash of the Titan's destruction momentarily illuminated the battlefield. Gary's escape pod tumbled through the chaos, eventually retrieved by the Vengeance. As he stumbled onto the bridge, a grim-faced officer approached. "Sir, we've lost contact with Sire Father's team. The colony, it's fallen." Before Gary could process this blow, a transmission cut through the static. Horth's scarred visage filled the screen, his voice a menacing growl. "Attention, Alliance forces. I have your precious strike team. Surrender now or watch as I execute them one by one." Gary's fists clenched as he surveyed the battered remains of his fleet. The war had taken a terrible turn, but he refused to let it end here. Sire Father and the others were counting on them. "Patch me through to Admiral Vance," he said, his voice steady. "We're going to hit these bastards where it hurts." "Hurts the most." Gary's voice was tight as he addressed Admiral Vance through the secure channel. The bridge of the Vengeance hummed with nervous energy as the surviving crew awaited orders. Vance's hologram flickered, his face etched with worry. "I understand, Captain, but we can't rush into this. Horth's new weapon changes everything." "With respect, sir, every moment we delay is another life lost." Gary leaned forward, his squeezing hard on the console. "Let me take a small team. We can infiltrate Horth's base, free our people." The Admiral's eyes narrowed. "It's too risky. We need to regroup, assess our losses." "Damn it, Jim!" Gary's fist slammed down. "That's Sire Father out there. My crew. We owe them this chance." A tense silence stretched between them. Finally, Vance sighed. "You have 48 hours. After that, I'm ordering a full retreat to fortify our core systems." Gary nodded sharply. "Understood. We won't let you down." As the transmission ended, Ava Novak approached. Her eyes were haunted, the loss of her fighter squad weighing heavily. "Captain, I want in on this mission." "Wouldn't have it any other way, Lieutenant." Gary turned to address the bridge. "I need volunteers. This is strictly off the books, maximum risk. Anyone not up for it, no judgment." To his pride, not a single crew member stepped back. Hours later, a nondescript merchant vessel slipped out of the Vengeance's hangar. On board, Gary, Ava, Razalok, and Lyra huddled around a holographic display of Horth's base. Lyra's fingers danced over the controls. "Security's tight, but I know their systems. If we can get to this access point, I can loop the feeds." Razalok growled, all four eyes focused on potential entry points. "Guards will be on high alert. We'll need a distraction." Gary nodded. "Agreed. Ava, you'll take point on that. Once we're in, we move fast. Find Sire Father and the others, then extract." The ship shuddered as it dropped out of FTL on the outskirts of the occupied human colony. Through the view screen, they could see the scars of Horth's assault, burning cities, shattered defenses. "Incoming transmission," Lyra reported. Benzite patrol demanding identification. Gary took a deep breath. Showtime! Their ruse held as they docked at a crowded spaceport. Blending with the throng of merchants and refugees, the team made their way towards the prison complex. Ava split off, disappearing into the crowd to set up their diversion. As they neared the target, an explosion rocked the far side of the compound. Alarms blared, and Benzite troops rushed to investigate. Now, Gary ordered. Lyra's hacking skills proved invaluable as they breached the security perimeter. They fought their way through surprised guards, Razalok's massive frame clearing a path. They found Sirefather in a dingy cell, his once proud form battered and bloodied. Other Alliance prisoners huddled nearby, hope rekindling in their eyes. Took you long enough, Sirefather croaked, managing a weak smile. Gary helped his friend to his feet. Let's get you home. The escape was chaos. Benzite reinforcements poured in, forcing the team to fight a running battle through twisting corridors. They were almost to their extraction point when Horth's voice boomed over the facility's speakers. Pathetic humans, did you think you could defy me? The ground shook as orbital bombardment began. Gary's blood ran cold as he realized Horth was willing to sacrifice the entire colony to stop them. New plan, he shouted over the din. We're taking their ships. They emerged into a hellscape. Buildings crumbled, fires raged unchecked. Civilians ran screaming as Benzite cruisers rained death from above. Gary made the hardest call of his life. We can't save everyone. Get as many as you can to the landing pads. Move! They fought their way to a cluster of Benzite shuttles, herding shell-shocked colonists aboard. As they prepared for liftoff, Gary locked eyes with Ava across the burning tarmac. She nodded grimly, understanding passing between them. The stolen ships rocketed into orbit, leaving the devastation behind. But Gary knew this was not nearly finished. Horth had to be stopped, at any expense. As they regrouped aboard the Vengeance, Lyra approached with a determined glint in her eye. Captain, I have an idea. It's risky, but it might be our only shot at taking down Horth for good. Gary listened intently as she outlined her plan to infiltrate the Warlord's flagship. It was audacious, borderline suicidal. But after what they'd just witnessed, he knew they had to act. Brief the team, he ordered. We move as soon as Sirefather's cleared by medical. As Lyra hurried off, Gary's comm unit chirped. A grim-faced intel officer appeared on the screen. Sir, we've intercepted reports of a new Benzite bioweapon. They're calling it the Crystalline Death. Entire Alliance outposts, they're just gone. Gary's lips pursed. The stakes had just gotten even higher. As he turned to prepare for their risky move, one thought burned in his mind. Horth had to be stopped, or humanity was finished. Gary's teeth clenched as he absorbed the intel officer's report. The Crystalline Death. He'd seen enough horrors in this war, but this new Benzite bioweapon threatened to eclipse them all. Understood, he said, his voice tight. Keep me updated on any further developments. As the transmission ended, Lyra burst onto the bridge, her eyes alight with nervous energy. Captain, I've got it. A way to infiltrate Horth's flagship. Gary listened intently as she outlined her plan. It was audacious, bordering on suicidal, but after witnessing the devastation on Proxima, he knew they had to act. Brief the team, he ordered. We move as soon as Sirefather's cleared by medical. Hours later, dressed in the stolen Benzite maintenance uniforms, Gary led his strike force through the cavernous hangar of Horth's flagship. Lyra's hacked credentials had gotten them this far, but every step felt like walking on razor's edge. Remember, Gary subvocalized into his team's comms, Razalok's group heads for auxiliary control. My team takes the reactor. Stay low, stay quiet. They split up, each group melting into the labyrinthine corridors of the massive vessel. Gary's heart pounded as they neared the reactor core, every encounter with Benzite crew a potential disaster. Suddenly, alarms blared. Razalok's team is engaging hostiles, Ava reported, her voice tense. Our diversion's working, but they're taking heavy fire. Gary nodded grimly. Then we'd better make this count. They fought their way into the reactor chamber, Lyra immediately setting to work on the control systems. Gary and Ava provided covering fire as Benzite security forces converged on their position. "How much longer?" Gary shouted over the din of battle. Lyra's fingers flew across alien interfaces. "Almost there. Just need to—" A deafening roar cut her off. Through the haze of weapons fire, Gary saw a massive figure stride into view. Horth himself had joined the fray. "Go!" Sire Father bellowed, charging towards the Benzite warlord. "I'll hold them off." Gary's protest died in his throat as he saw the tenacity in his friend's eyes. With a final nod of respect, he ushered the rest of the team towards their escape route. They fled through smoky corridors, the ship shuddering beneath their feet as the sabotaged reactor built towards critical mass. Razalok's team joined them, battered but alive, as they raced for their commandeered shuttle. As they blasted free of the dying flagship, Gary watched the massive vessel erupt in a silent blossom of fire. Sire Father's sacrifice had bought them this victory, but at a terrible cost. There was no time to mourn. As they rendezvoused with the Vengeance, Admiral Vance's grim visage appeared on the main view screen. "We've confirmed multiple Alliance colonies hit by the crystalline death," Vance reported, his voice heavy. "And we've lost contact with Earth itself." A stunned silence fell over the bridge. Gary's mind reeled at the implications. How many billions lost? How many worlds reduced to lifeless crystal? "There's more," Vance continued. "We're picking up chatter about a Benzite superweapon, something that could end this war in one strike and take half the galaxy with it." Gary straightened, his grit hardening. "What are our orders, sir?" "You're being recalled to Alliance Mobile Command," Vance said. "We're assembling an elite strike force for a desperate mission. It may be our last chance to stop the Benzites before it's too late." As the Vengeance jumped to FTL, Gary looked at his battered crew, human and alien alike. They'd lost so much, but the true test still lay ahead. The Vengeance dropped out of FTL, its hull still bearing scars from the recent battles. Gary strode onto the bridge of the newly commissioned Gas Defiant, his eyes scanning the assembled crew. Ava Novak stood at tactical, her posture tense but ready. Razalok's massive frame hunched over the engineering console, all four eyes focused on the readouts. Dr. Ethan Roth fiddled with a handheld scanner, while Lyra's fingers danced across the navigation controls. "Status report," Gary ordered, settling into the captain's chair. "All systems nominal," Razalok growled. "Experimental stealth systems online and functioning." Gary nodded. "Take us in, Lyra, nice and easy." The Defiant glided forward, its sleek profile cutting through the swirling gases of the uncharted nebula. Brilliant flashes of energy crackled around them as ion storms raged. The ship bucked and shuddered, inertial dampeners straining to compensate. "Spatial anomaly dead ahead," Lyra called out, her voice tight with concentration. "Adjusting course." Gary clutched the armrests as the Defiant banked hard, narrowly avoiding a tear in the fabric of spacetime. Alarms blared as systems flickered under the strain. "Shields at 60%, Ava reported. "We can't take much more of this." "Hold course," Gary commanded. "We knew this wouldn't be easy." Hours crawled by as they navigated the treacherous maze of the nebula. Finally, they emerged into clear space and found themselves face to face with the heart of the Benzite Empire. A vast array of orbital platforms and shipyards stretched before them. Countless Benzite vessels swarmed like angry insects, their weapons primed and ready. "By the stars," Dr. Roth breathed. "How are we supposed to get through that?" Gary's mind raced, weighing their options. "Lyra, pull up the intel on Benzite freighter patterns. Ava, ready those holographic decoys. We're going to walk right through their front door." The plan came together with practiced efficiency. They located a derelict Benzite freighter drifting on the outskirts of the system. Using tractor beams and some creative piloting from Lyra, they maneuvered the Defiant inside the freighter's cavernous hold. "Decoys are online," Ava confirmed, emitting false sensor readings. "Now." The Defiant, nestled within its Trojan horse, drifted towards the weapons research facility. Tense minutes passed as they approached the security perimeter. "We're being hailed," Lyra reported. Gary nodded to Razalok, who had donned a crude benzite disguise. The alien rumbled a series of guttural phrases into the comm system, his vocal cords straining to mimic benzite speech patterns. A moment of agonizing silence followed. Then miraculously, the security net parted. They touched down on the facility's landing pad, the freighter's battered hull creaking ominously. Gary led the strike team out, their weapons at the ready. "Remember," he said, his voice low, "we're here for two things: neutralize security and get that data. Move fast, stay quiet." They ghosted through dimly lit corridors, Lyra's insider knowledge proving invaluable as she guided them past sensor grids and patrol routes. When conflict became inevitable, they struck with ruthless efficiency. In the heart of the facility, Dr. Roth plugged into a data terminal. His eyes widened as he sifted through the horrifying details of the benzite bioweapon program. "It's worse than we thought," he whispered. "They're not just killing us, they're erasing us from existence." A distant alarm began to wail. Gary's comm crackled to life, Ava's voice urgent. "Captain, we've been made. Horth's personal guard is inbound." Gary's mind raced, assessing their rapidly dwindling options. "Ava, get to the hangar. Hijack a fighter and get that data out of here. The rest of us will buy you time." He looked at his team, human and alien alike, and saw the same dogged persistence reflected in their eyes. They had come too far to fail now. As Ava sprinted for the hangar, Gary and the others took up defensive positions. The sound of approaching benzite troops echoed through the facility. "Whatever happens," Gary said, his voice steady, "it's been an honor serving with you all." The first wave of benzite soldiers rounded the corner, and the air erupted in a storm of weapons fire. Fire! Gary's team held their ground, methodically picking off benzite soldiers as they poured into the corridor. The air crackled with energy weapons and the acrid smell of ozone. "Ava, status!" Gary barked into his comm. "Almost there," came the breathless reply. "Hangar's in sight, but I've got heavy resistance." A deafening explosion rocked the facility. Chunks of ceiling rained down, forcing Gary's team to fall back. "We can't hold this position," Razalok growled, his massive frame providing cover as they retreated. Gary's mind raced. "Lyra, any other routes to the hangar?" She tapped furiously at her wrist computer. "Maintenance shaft, 2 levels down. It's tight, but—" "It'll do," Gary cut her off. "Move." They fought their way to a service elevator, descending into the bowels of the facility. The cramped maintenance shaft echoed with the distant sounds of battle. As they emerged near the hangar, Gary's comm crackled to life. Admiral Vance's grim voice cut through the chaos. "Collins, we've lost contact with Earth. Multiple Alliance colonies hit by the crystalline death. It's worse than we feared." Gary's blood ran cold. "How bad?" "Billions dead, entire worlds reduced to lifeless crystal." The weight of those words hung heavy as they entered the hangar. Ava had commandeered a sleek benzite fighter, its engines humming with awe-inspiring power. "We've got the data," Gary said, his voice tight. "But at what cost?" As they piled into the stolen ship, alarms blared throughout the facility. Horth's personal guard had arrived in force. Ava's hands flew across unfamiliar controls. The fighter lurched forward, nearly clipping a support beam as it rocketed out of the hangar. "Strap in," she shouted. "This is going to be close." The sky outside was chaos. Benzite cruisers swarmed, weapons blazing as they tried to intercept the fleeing craft. Gary watched in horror as Horth's flagship oriented towards them, its main cannon charging with ominous energy. "Evasive maneuvers," he ordered. Ava threw the fighter into a wild spiral, narrowly avoiding the devastating beam that lanced past them. The Defiant loomed ahead, already turning to make the jump to FTL. As they docked, Gary's comm chimed again. It was Dr. Roth, his face ashen. "Captain, you need to see this," the scientist said. "The data, it's not just a weapon, it's extinction on a galactic scale." Gary's heart made as he absorbed the implications. He turned to his battered crew, seeing the same unyielding commitment in their eyes. "Set course for Alliance Command," he ordered. "We need to regroup and plan our next move." As the Defiant jumped to FTL, leaving the devastation behind, Gary knew the true test still lay ahead. The fate of not just humanity, but countless species now hung in the balance. Days later, the Defiant dropped out of FTL, its hull still bearing scars from recent battles. The vast shipyards of Lyra's homeworld stretched before them, a hive of frantic activity as civilian transports were loaded for evacuation. Gary strode onto the bridge, his face etched with fatigue. Status report. Ava looked up from her tactical display. Benzite ships detected on long-range scans. ETA 40 minutes. And the evacuation? Razalok's gravelly voice rumbled from the engineering station. Proceeding, but slowly. We're looking at hours, not minutes. Gary's lips tightened. We don't have hours. Lyra, coordinate with the ground teams. Get as many people on those transports as possible. As Lyra hurried to comply, Dr. Roth approached, his eyes bloodshot from days of nonstop work. Captain, I've integrated the Alliance's countermeasures into our systems. It might slow the crystallization process, but it won't stop it entirely. It'll have to be enough, Gary replied. We just need to buy time for the evacuation. The bridge erupted into controlled chaos as the Defiant took up a defensive position. Ava's fingers danced across her console, coordinating with the few remaining Alliance ships in the system. The first wave of Benzite fighters appeared like angry insects on the horizon. Energy weapons lit up the sky as the battle was joined. Civilian transports taking heavy fire, Razalok shouted over the din. Gary's mind raced. Ava, Razalok, take our auxiliary craft. Run interference for those transports. I'll coordinate from here. As his officers sprinted for the hangar, Gary turned to the main view screen. The planet's surface was already showing signs of crystallization, creeping patterns of unnatural geometry spreading across continents. How much longer? He demanded. Lyra's voice was strained. We've barely evacuated a quarter of the population. There's not enough. Her words were cut off by a blinding flash. Gary shielded his eyes, his heart sinking as he realized what had happened. No, Lyra whispered. It's too soon. The bioweapon had detonated prematurely. Vast swaths of the planet's surface were transforming before their eyes. Billions of lives snuffed out in an instant. Get those transports clear, Gary roared. We're out of time. As the Defiant maneuvered to cover the retreating civilian ships, Lyra's voice came over the comm. It was barely recognizable, choked with grief and purpose. Captain, I'm going planetside. Negative, Gary shot back. It's suicide. My family is down there, Lyra replied. And there's data in the colony archives. It might be our only chance to stop this for good. Gary hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded grimly. Do what you have to do. We'll hold position as long as we can. As Lyra's shuttle streaked towards the disintegrating planet, Gary turned his attention back to the battle. The Benzite forces were pressing hard, their ships seemingly endless. Where the hell is our backup? He muttered. As if in answer, space itself seemed to tear open. The Vengeance and Indomitable burst into real space, their weapons already blazing. This is Admiral Vance, a familiar voice crackled over the comm. Sorry we're late to the party, Collins. With the reinforcements turning the tide, Gary allowed himself a moment of hope. But as casualty reports began to pour in from across Alliance space, that hope quickly faded. Lyra's shuttle returned, the alien woman's eyes haunted as she clutched a data core to her chest. I have it, she said simply. But the cost... Gary placed a hand on her shoulder, words failing him. He knew no comfort could ease the loss she had just endured. As the battered Alliance fleet regrouped, the full scale of the devastation became clear. Over a dozen core worlds reduced to lifeless crystal, billions dead, the very future of multiple species hanging by a thread. Admiral Vance's hologram flickered to life on the bridge. I'm convening an emergency council, all ship captains and civilian leaders. We need options, and we need them now. Gary nodded grimly. We'll be there, sir. As the Defiant limped towards the rendezvous point, Gary looked at his crew, human and alien alike. They had been through hell, and he knew the true test still lay ahead. Whatever came next, he silently vowed, they would face it together. Gary Collins stared at the holographic display, his face hardened as he absorbed the grim reality before him. The Alliance fleet was battered, their numbers dwindling with each passing hour. Across the bridge of the Defiant, his crew worked tirelessly, their faces etched with exhaustion and commitment. "Captain," Ava Novak's voice cut through the tension, "I have a plan." Gary turned to his second-in-command, noting the steely glint in her eyes. "Let's hear it." Ava outlined her audacious strategy to infiltrate Warlord Horth's Dreadnought and use its antimatter reactor to disrupt the Benzite's bioweapon matrix. It was a long shot, but it was the best chance they had. "I'll lead the strike team myself," Ava finished, her voice unwavering. Gary nodded, knowing there was no time for debate. "Assemble your team. Take Razalok and Lyra. We'll coordinate with the Vengeance and Indomitable for cover." As Ava moved to prepare, Gary turned to Dr. Roth. "Doctor, I need you to work with Lyra. Use every scrap of data we have on the Benzite's technology. Find us a way in." The next hours passed in a blur of frenetic activity. The Defiant's crew worked with practiced efficiency, preparing for what could be their final mission. Gary watched as Ava's strike team geared up, their faces a mixture of grim grit and tightly controlled fear. "Approaching the gas giant," Lyra reported from her station, "initiating slingshot maneuver." The Defiant surged forward, its engines straining as it curved around the massive celestial body. G-forces pressed Gary into his chair as the ship accelerated, using the planet's gravity to mask their approach. "Energy signature dampeners holding," Razalok rumbled from engineering. "We're ghost." As they cleared the gas giant's orbit, Horth's Dreadnought loomed before them, a behemoth of alien design that dwarfed even the largest Alliance vessels. Gary's eyes narrowed as he took in its defensive array. "Ava, you're clear for launch," he said, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. "May the stars guide you." The strike team's shuttle detached from the Defiant, a tiny speck against the vastness of space. Gary watched it disappear into the shadows of the Dreadnought's superstructure, knowing that the fate of billions now rested on their shoulders. "This is Admiral Vance," the comm crackled to life. "All ships, engage the enemy. Give that strike team everything we've got." The space around them erupted into chaos as Alliance ships launched their desperate offensive. Energy weapons lanced across the void, striking Benzite's vessels with pinpoint accuracy. The Defiant weaved through the melee, providing cover fire as Ava's team penetrated deeper into enemy territory. Inside the Dreadnought, Ava led her team through twisting corridors, relying on Lyra's intel to avoid detection. They encountered sporadic resistance, each firefight a brutal, close-quarters affair that left no room for error. "We're approaching the reactor core," Ava whispered into her comm. "Heavy opposition ahead." Gary's fingers tightened on the arms of his chair as he listened to the sounds of battle filtering through the comms. The strike team fought with ruthless efficiency, but the Benzite's guards were equally determined. "Reactor chamber breached," Ava's voice came through, breathless but triumphant. "Initiating overload sequence." A tense silence fell over the Defiant's bridge as they waited. Suddenly, a blinding flash erupted from the heart of Horth's flagship. The antimatter explosion rippled outward, tearing through subspace itself. "It's working!" Dr. Roth exclaimed, his eyes wide as he monitored the data streams. "The biomatrix is destabilizing across Alliance space." Gary allowed himself a moment of relief before the reality of their situation crashed back. "Ava, status report!" Static crackled over the comm before Ava's voice came through, strained and filled with static. "Reactor detonation crippled the flagship. Razalok and part of the team trapped. No way out." Gary's heart sank as he processed her words. He opened his mouth to respond, but Razalok's gravelly voice cut him off. "It's been an honor, Captain," the alien rumbled. "Make it count." The comms went silent as Gary watched Horth's Dreadnought convulse, great gouts of antimatter fire erupting from its hull. He gripped the arms of his chair, willing Ava and the survivors to make it out alive. "Incoming transmission," Lyra reported, her voice tight with emotion. "It's Warlord Horth." Gary steeled himself as the Benzite's leader's hologram flickered to life on the bridge. Horth's alien features were contorted with a mixture of rage and defeat. "You have won this day, human," Horth snarled. "I offer my unconditional surrender in exchange for the safety of my remaining ships." As Gary prepared to respond, a tiny shuttle burst from the dying dreadnought, narrowly avoiding the debris field. Ava's voice crackled over the comm. "Defiant, this is Novak, requesting immediate pickup." Relief washed over Gary as he gave the order to retrieve the shuttle. He turned back to Horth's hologram, his voice steady as he accepted the Benzites' surrender. The bridge erupted into controlled chaos as damage reports flooded in from across Alliance space. The cost of victory was staggering. Over 20 billion lives lost, entire worlds reduced to crystalline wastelands, but billions more had been saved from the deactivated bioweapons. As the adrenaline of battle faded, Gary felt the weight of command settle heavily on his shoulders. He looked around at his battered crew, seeing the same mix of exhaustion, grief, and cautious hope reflected in their eyes. "Prepare for emergency council meeting," Gary ordered, his voice hoarse. "We need to plan our next steps." The Defiant limped towards the rendezvous point, its scarred hull a testament to the brutal conflict they had endured. Gary knew that the real challenge lay ahead, forging a new galactic order in the aftermath of unimaginable destruction. As Ava's shuttle docked and the survivors of the strike team stumbled onto the bridge, Gary met their eyes one by one. No words were needed. The shared experience of the past hours bound them together more tightly than any speech could. With a deep breath, Gary turned to face the view screen, ready to confront whatever challenges the future might hold. The Defiant's observation deck was silent save for the soft hum of life support systems. Gary stood before the viewport, his reflection ghostly against the backdrop of stars. Behind him, rows of empty chairs faced a simple podium, adorned with the Alliance emblem. He turned as the first attendees began to file in. Ava entered, her newly minted commander's insignia gleaming on her collar. She gave Gary a nod, her eyes conveying a depth of shared experience words could never capture. As the deck filled, Gary took his place at the podium. He gazed out at the assembled crew, human and alien faces united in grief and exhaustion. The cost of victory deeply affected on them all. "We gather today," Gary began, his voice steady despite the emotions roiling beneath the surface, "to honor those who gave everything so that others might live." He gestured to the viewport, where a line of caskets drifted in the void. Each bore the flag of a different Alliance world, symbols of unity in the face of near extinction. "Razalok," Gary continued, his voice catching slightly, "your sacrifice will never be forgotten." As he spoke the names of the fallen, a Benzite delegation entered, led by the defeated warlord Horth. The alien's posture was rigid, his compound eyes reflecting the starlight. Gary concluded the eulogy, and a mournful alien melody filled the air. Lyra stood, her voice trembling, as she sang a lament for her lost homeworld. The raw emotion in her performance left many in tears. As the caskets were committed to the void, Gary watched Ava. Her jaw was clenched, eyes fixed on the drifting memorials. He knew the weight of command she now carried, the lives lost under her leadership despite their ultimate victory. The ceremony concluded, and the crew dispersed. Gary found himself alone with Horth, an uncomfortable silence stretching between them. "Your kind fought with honor," Horth said finally, his translator struggling to convey the complex harmonics of his native tongue. Gary nodded, unsure how to respond. The magnitude of the Benzites' crimes warred with the need for reconciliation. Their uneasy exchange was interrupted by the arrival of Senator Grayson. The politician's eyes gleamed with barely concealed triumph as he regarded the defeated warlord. "Captain Collins," Grayson said, his voice smooth as silk. "A word, if you please." Gary followed Grayson to a quiet corner, apprehension building in his gut. "The tribunal has reached a decision," Grayson announced. "Horth and his lieutenants are to be executed for their crimes against sentience." Gary's eyes widened. "Senator, surely there's another way. Rehabilitation, confinement." Grayson cut him off with a wave of his hand. "The decision is final. We cannot risk another Benzite uprising." As Grayson outlined his plans for further sanctions against the entire Benzite race, Gary felt a chill run down his spine. The senator's words were measured, but the underlying current of vengeance was unmistakable. Later, in the privacy of his quarters, Gary pored over Dr. Roth's latest findings. The scientist's data offered hope, a path towards neutralizing the benzite bioweapon and eventual reintegration of their species. A chime at his door interrupted his thoughts. Ava entered, her face grave. "Sir," she said, her voice low, "there's been an incident. Admiral Vance, he's dead." Gary's blood ran cold as Ava relayed the details of the assassination. In that moment, he knew the delicate balance they had fought so hard to achieve was about to shatter. As alarms blared throughout the ship, Gary strode towards the bridge. The hard-won peace was slipping away, and he found himself racing once more against the specter of annihilation, this time born not from alien weapons, but from the darkness that lurked within their own hearts.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.